All right, ready to dive into some seriously big questions.
Oh, yeah, bring it on.
We're talking about the future of humanity with Yuval Noah Harari. His books, Sapiens, Homo Deus, and 21 Lessons, they really paint this picture of where we might be headed.
And it's not always pretty, right?
No, not always, no. He talks about this potential rise of Homo Deus, like literally human God.
Which, I mean, think about it. It's kind of mind-blowing. Humans with godlike powers.
It is, but he doesn't just jump into the sci-fi stuff, right?
No.
He sets the scene by looking at the world today, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
And one of his big points is that a lot of people are just disillusioned with liberalism. They see it as either failing or just, like, impossible to achieve.
So even before we get to AI and bioengineering, there's this feeling of discontent bubbling under the surface. What's driving that, do you think?
Well, Harari suggests a few things, you know. Some people, they long for those old hierarchies based on things like nationality or gender.
I like the good old days.
Yeah, kind of a back-to-basics approach.
I see.
And then you have others who see globalization as this rigged game that only benefits a tiny elite.
So it's a sense of unfairness, like
Yeah.
the system's broken.
Exactly. And then, boom, technology enters the scene and raises the stakes even higher.
It's like throwing gasoline on a fire.
He calls it the twin revolutions of infotech and biotech.
So like a 1-2 punch of disruption.
Right. And here's where things get really interesting. He argues that any story, any belief system, it has to make sense of AI, big data, bioengineering to capture humanity's attention.
It's like these technologies are forcing us to rewrite the human story.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of Harari's most mind-blowing concepts, the idea that humans could achieve godlike powers.
Okay, this is where things start to sound like a sci-fi movie. We're talking immortality, designer babies, engineered happiness.
Yeah, all that. And Harari suggests that these ideas, once pure fantasy, they're now within the realm of possibility, all thanks to advances in biotechnology and artificial intelligence.
So how does this potential for godlike power connect to this crisis of liberalism we were talking about?
Well, he argues that part of the crisis stems from a loss of faith in those grand narratives that have guided humanity for so long.
Okay.
Liberalism, with its emphasis on individual rights, reason, progress, it's one of those narratives. But now, with technology promising to solve problems that have plagued us forever, you know, like death and suffering, it's challenging those old narratives.
Right.
And it's leaving a lot of people feeling lost and uncertain.
Yeah, like we're standing on the edge of a new world, but we don't have a map.
Right. And one of the biggest unknowns in this new world is AI, you know, artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Harari dives deep into how AI is already analyzing our behavior, predicting our decisions, even moving into jobs that we thought were uniquely human.
It's like the robots are coming for our jobs.
Well, it's not just a sci-fi trope anymore, is it?
I guess not.
Doctors, lawyers, artists, you name it.
AI is everywhere.
AI is making inroads into fields that we once considered the exclusive domain of human intelligence.
So what happens to all those human doctors and lawyers and artists then? Harari talks about this useless class, emerging people who simply can't keep up with a technologically advanced society.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought, you know?
It is.
Raises serious questions about the future of work, education, even the social contract. Like, what do we owe each other in a world where machines can do so much?
Okay, before we get too far down that road, back up a second. We're talking about AI potentially replacing human workers, but what are the upsides of AI? Why are we even going down this road?
Well, Harari points out some pretty compelling advantages. Think about connectivity and updatability. You could update billions of AI doctors worldwide in a split second with the latest medical breakthroughs.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Try doing that with human doctors.
That's impossible.
Exactly. That's just one example. AI has the potential to solve problems in ways we can only dream of, like analyzing massive data sets, making super fast calculations.
Okay, that makes sense. But it raises a big question for me. Can we teach humans to outcreate these machines?
Right.
What happens to human ingenuity in a world dominated by AI?
That's one of the big questions Harari grapples with. And it's not just about jobs, it's about our whole way of life. I mean, we're already letting algorithms make decisions for us, you know, from what we watch to what we buy.
He even suggests that algorithms could influence who we date or marry. It's like, are we losing our ability to think for ourselves?
It's a valid concern,
Yeah.
and it takes us into some pretty dark territory. The potential for digital dictatorships, where regimes use AI and data not just to monitor citizens, but to control their emotions,
Yeah.
to shape their opinions.
Like that old saying, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. But in this case, it's not just our data, it's our thoughts, our feelings, our very identities.
Exactly. And that raises profound questions about freedom, about autonomy, and the future of democracy itself.
So with all this talk of algorithms and dictatorships, it's easy to get caught up in the potential dystopias. But Harari brings it back to something very human: consciousness.
Yeah, he argues that we still don't really understand how consciousness arises, and it's not clear if AI will ever achieve genuine consciousness. And this is a crucial point.
Because we could end up with these super intelligent machines being controlled by, well, us.
Flawed, emotional, easily manipulated humans.
Kind of a scary thought.
It is. Imagine a powerful AI capable of incredible things, but guided by our own short-sightedness, greed, even our capacity for violence.
So what's the solution? What does Harari suggest we do?
Well, he doesn't offer any easy answers, but he stresses the need for critical thinking, for mindfulness, and for a serious examination of our own beliefs and assumptions.
So it's not just about building better machines, it's about becoming better humans.
Right, and he even suggests that this Buddhist practice of self-observation might be more relevant than ever in the age of AI.
So we're facing these unprecedented challenges, and the old ways of thinking just aren't cutting it anymore. It really does leave us with a massive question. What kind of world do we actually want to create?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that each of us has to grapple with.
So where do we even begin to answer that question? We've covered a lot here. The crisis of liberalism, the rise of AI, this whole idea of humans becoming godlike. Is there anything else from Harari that can help us navigate this uncharted territory?
Well, one thing that might surprise you is that he brings religion into the conversation. He asks if traditional religions can offer any guidance in this brave new world.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have expected that. What does he say about the role of religion?
He acknowledges that religion has historically played a huge role in fostering cooperation and creating meaning.
Right.
He examines whether these ancient systems of belief can still offer a viable vision for the future, even with all the technological disruption.
But he doesn't shy away from religion's potential downsides.
Right.
Its capacity for division and conflict.
You're absolutely right. He highlights those tensions between religious belief and scientific understanding.
Yeah.
He even questions if we need a new narrative that reconciles faith and reason. It's a complex issue.
It is. And speaking of complex issues, let's talk about one of Harari's most intriguing and maybe unsettling ideas, the concept of the useless class.
Yeah.
This goes right to the heart of those anxieties about the future of work.
Absolutely. The rise of automation has been a hot topic for a while now, but Harari, he takes it a step further. He argues that we could be heading toward a future where a large chunk of the population simply can't keep up with the demands of a technologically advanced society.
That's a pretty scary thought.
It is.
We like to think of technological progress as positive, but what if it leaves so many people behind?
And it brings us back to that crisis of liberalism we discussed earlier. What happens to our democratic institutions, to social cohesion, if a huge segment of the population feels economically and socially irrelevant?
Yeah. It's a question that should keep us all up at night, and one that deserves our attention and careful consideration for sure.
It's interesting how Harari doesn't just, throw out these big ideas about AI in the future. He really grounds them in historical examples that make the arguments come to life.
Yeah. I love a good historical parallel. What kind of examples does he use?
One that really stuck with me was his comparison of our modern obsession with lawns to, get this, religious rituals.
Okay, that's a new one. Lawns and religion. How does he connect those?
Well, he argues that the perfectly manicured lawn, like you'd see at the White House or a country club, it's become this symbol of power, status, even, dare I say, moral virtue.
I see what you mean, like the homeowner who spends every Saturday meticulously mowing their lawn.
Right.
It was practically a sacred act.
Exactly. And Harari points out that this obsession, it's spread all over the world, even to places where it makes absolutely no ecological sense. He talks about this museum in Qatar, the Museum of Islamic Art. It's surrounded by these lush green lawns that look more like they belong in Versailles than in the Middle East.
So how does this tie back to religion? What's the deeper connection?
Well, Harari argues that just like those ancient rituals we read about in history books, our lawn care practices are driven by these deep-seated beliefs and cultural norms. We've come to associate a perfect lawn with a certain way of life, a certain level of prosperity and social standing. And we pour so much time and money and effort into maintaining this image, even if it's not always rational or sustainable.
Wow, it really makes you wonder what future anthropologists will make of our lawn obsession. Maybe they'll dig up our lawnmower blades and put them in museums right next to like ancient religious artifacts.
Speaking of looking back at history, Harari also spends quite a bit of time in Homo Deus exploring the agricultural revolution and its impact on human society and the animal kingdom.
Right, we often think of agriculture as this huge leap forward for humanity. But Harari, as always, challenges that simple narrative. What is his take?
He argues that while the agricultural revolution did lead to the development of cities and civilizations, it also introduced new forms of suffering and exploitation, not just for humans, but for the animals we domesticated.
He uses some pretty stark examples, too, like those factory farms where animals are crammed into tiny cages, pumped full of antibiotics, and basically treated like machines.
Exactly. He argues that while wild animals face dangers like predators and starvation, domesticated animals are subjected to this systematic abuse and confinement, they're bred for very specific traits, often at the expense of their health and well-being. It's a pretty disturbing picture.
It really makes you think about the ethics of our relationship with the natural world.
Yeah.
And it ties into his point about the Anthropocene, right? The era where human actions are the dominant force shaping the planet, often with some pretty devastating consequences.
Absolutely. And it connects to his broader argument about the increasing power of Homo sapiens to manipulate and control nature, where we're talking about manipulating the very fabric of life itself through bioengineering. And Harari urges us to really consider the ethical implications of wielding this kind of godlike power, because we could very easily end up creating a world that's not only unsustainable but deeply inhumane as well.
So we're on the verge of potentially achieving these godlike powers, but we don't even fully understand ourselves. What does Harari say about consciousness, which is, arguably at the core of what makes us human?
He dives into this fact that we still don't fully understand how consciousness arises, even in humans. He distinguishes between the brain, that physical network of neurons and synapses, and the mind, which is that flow of subjective experiences, thoughts, feelings, and sensations.
So we know a lot about how the physical brain works.
Yeah.
But we're still in the dark about how those physical processes create the subjective experience of consciousness. It's like we can map the circuitry, but we don't know how the electricity creates the light.
That's a great analogy. And this leads to some pretty mind-boggling questions about the potential for AI to actually develop consciousness. If we don't even understand our own consciousness, how can we possibly program it into a machine? It's like trying to create a recipe for something you've never tasted.
Okay, so conscious AI is still a big question mark. But does Harari think it's something we need to be worried about in the near future?
He argues that while we can't rule out the possibility, the immediate danger is actually something else. He worries that we're pouring so much energy into developing artificial intelligence that we're neglecting the development of our own consciousness. We're focusing on creating smarter machines without making ourselves wiser.
So we could end up with these super intelligent machines being controlled by humans who are, prone to biases driven by short-term gratification and easily manipulated. It's kind of a recipe for disaster.
It is. He uses a pretty stark comparison. It's like giving a loaded gun to a toddler.
Yeah.
And this is where he brings back the importance of mindfulness and self-awareness. He suggests that the Buddhist practice of observing your own thoughts and emotions without judgment, it can help us become more conscious of what's driving our behavior.
So we need to be more aware of our own knee-jerk reactions. Those ingrained biases that we often act on without even realizing it.
Yeah.
We have to become more conscious of the inner workings of our own minds.
Exactly. And that self-awareness can help us make more conscious choices, make us less vulnerable to manipulation, and maybe even help us cultivate a more ethical and compassionate approach to the world.
So mindfulness isn't just about meditating on a cushion for an hour a day. It's about bringing that awareness into every aspect of our lives, our work, our relationships, even our political choices.
You got it.
Yeah.
And speaking of of history and how it might inform our future, Harari draws another really interesting parallel. He compares the current crisis of liberalism to the collapse of the Roman Empire.
Wow, that's pretty heavy comparison. How does he even begin to connect those two things?
Well, he argues that the Roman Empire, much like the liberal world order today, was built on a set of shared values and institutions that were incredibly successful for centuries. But over time, those values eroded. Those institutions became weakened, and the empire became increasingly vulnerable to all sorts of pressures, both internal and external.
So what are the parallels to today's world? What's making liberalism so vulnerable right now?
Harari argues that much like the Roman Empire in its decline, liberalism is facing this crisis of legitimacy. People around the world are losing faith in liberal institutions, seeing them as corrupt, inefficient, or just completely out of touch with the needs of everyday people.
And we're also seeing those threats from outside.
Right.
Just like the Roman Empire faced those barbarian hordes at its borders. We're dealing with the rise of authoritarianism, religious fundamentalism, and even technological disruption that's shaking the foundations of our society.
Exactly. And all of this is happening in a world that's more interconnected and interdependent than ever before. So just like the collapse of the Roman Empire had ripple effects across Europe and beyond, the decline of the liberal world order would have profound consequences for the entire planet.
So where do we go from here? Are we just doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past?
Harari doesn't think so. He suggests that we need to learn from history, adapt our institutions, and maybe even update our values to meet the challenges of the 21st century. He argues that we need a new narrative, a new story that can unite humanity and give us a sense of shared purpose and destiny.
So we need to move beyond the nation state, embrace a more global perspective, and cultivate a sense of shared responsibility for the future of the planet. It's a tall order for sure.
It is, but Harari is optimistic about human potential. He reminds us that we're not just passive bystanders. We're active participants in shaping the course of history. It's a powerful reminder that we have agency, we have choices to make.
Okay, so we need a new story, a new way of thinking about ourselves and our place in the world. Does Harari offer any hints about what that story might look like? What kind of future is he envisioning?
Well, one concept he explores is dataism, this potential new religion or ideology that could emerge in the 21st century.
Dataism. That sounds intense. What exactly is it?
He describes it as this belief system based on the idea that the universe is essentially a flow of data, and that the most important thing is the processing of information.
So it's like algorithms and artificial intelligence becoming the dominant force shaping our world, even surpassing human intelligence. And we humans become worshipers of the algorithm.
It's a pretty radical idea, right? Harari suggests that dataism has the potential to both unite and divide humanity. On the one hand, it offers this universal language, this shared set of values that could transcend our cultural differences. But on the other hand, it could lead to this new kind of elite, those who control the data and the algorithms that process it.
It's a fascinating and maybe a little frightening thought to imagine a world where your worth is measured by your data output, where algorithms determine your fate, and where the pursuit of information becomes the ultimate goal.
It definitely raises some profound questions about consciousness, the meaning of life, and even what it means to be human in the future.
Will we become slaves to the algorithms, or will we find a way to use this power for good, for the benefit of all humanity? It's a question we have to seriously consider.
For all the talk about technological advancements and the potential for humans to become godlike, Harari doesn't shy away from some of our darker tendencies. He explores this idea that our quest for meaning can often lead to this cycle of sacrifice and even violence.
Okay, that sounds pretty intense. How does he connect meaning making with violence?
He starts by pointing out that we humans are meaning making creatures. We crave a sense of purpose. We need to believe that our lives have significance, and throughout history we've found that meaning in all sorts of things: religions, ideologies, national identities, even our favorite sports teams.
Right, but what does that have to do with violence?
Harari's point is that these sources of meaning, they often come with a price tag. They demand sacrifice, our time, our energy, our resources sometimes, even our lives. And he argues that this willingness to sacrifice can be exploited.
So leaders, whether they're religious or political, they use the promise of meaning and purpose to manipulate people into committing acts of violence and oppression.
Exactly. Think about the Crusades, the Inquisitions, the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century. These were all movements fueled by the belief that certain people or ideas were so dangerous, so evil that they had to be eliminated to protect a particular vision of the world.
It's a scary thought that our very search for meaning can lead us down such a dark path.
It is. Harari urges us to be mindful of the stories we tell ourselves, the beliefs we hold dear, and to really examine the values we prioritize. He encourages us to question those grand narratives, to be wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers.
So it's not about rejecting the search for meaning, but about being aware of the potential pitfalls of the ways that our longing for purpose can be twisted and used against us.
Exactly. He reminds us that
Right.
that the most important questions in life are often the ones that don't have easy answers. And sometimes the process of searching for those answers is more important than the answers themselves.
That's a really interesting point. It's like he's encouraging us to embrace the mystery, the unknown, and to accept that there's always more to learn and discover.
Another really interesting concept that Harari explores is the inner storyteller. It's this idea that we each have this little voice in our heads that's constantly narrating our lives, trying to make sense of our experiences and crafting a story about who we are.
I love this idea. It's like we're all the heroes of our own personal narratives.
Yeah.
But is that always a good thing?
That's what Harari wants us to think about. He points out that this inner storyteller is often biased, unreliable, and prone to self-deception. It filters our experiences through our existing beliefs and assumptions, and it's always trying to maintain a sense of consistency and coherence, even when the facts don't quite add up.
So our inner storyteller is constantly trying to protect our egos, even if it means distorting reality.
Exactly. And this can lead to all sorts of problems, from cognitive dissonance to confirmation bias to just straight up denial of reality. It's like our minds are constantly spinning these narratives to protect us from uncomfortable truths.
So how do we deal with this inner storyteller? Do we just try to ignore it?
Harari suggests that we can't simply shut it off, but we can become more aware of its tendencies and learn to question the stories it's telling us. We need to cultivate a healthy skepticism towards our own thoughts and beliefs.
It's like we have to become like investigative journalists of our own minds. We have to like dig deeper, check our sources, and be willing to challenge our own narratives.
Exactly. And this can be a really challenging process, but it's essential if we want to break free from those limiting beliefs and see the world with more clarity.
Okay, so we need to be mindful of our inner storyteller. But what about those larger stories that shape our world, those big narratives that we talked about earlier? Harari makes this pretty bold claim that liberalism, this ideology that's been so dominant for centuries, it might be reaching its limits.
It's a controversial argument, but it's worth considering. He acknowledges that liberalism has been incredibly successful in promoting individual freedom, democratic values, and economic prosperity. But he suggests it's facing some pretty serious challenges in the 21st century that could threaten its long-term viability.
What kind of challenges is he talking about?
Well, we're seeing the rise of authoritarianism and populism around the world. There's this backlash against globalization and a growing distrust of experts and institutions. And on top of that, we're dealing with the rapid pace of technological change, which is disrupting the job market, creating new forms of inequality, and challenging our ideas about privacy and autonomy.
It's a lot to grapple with. So is he saying that liberalism is doomed?
He's not saying it's inevitable, but he's urging us to be realistic about the challenges we're facing. He suggests that liberalism in its current form might not be equipped to deal with these unprecedented changes. He thinks we need to rethink some of our most basic assumptions about human nature, the role of government, and the relationship between the individual and society.
So it's not about abandoning the core values of liberalism, but about adapting them to the realities of the 21st century.
Exactly. And that requires a willingness to have those difficult conversations, to challenge our own beliefs, and to be open to new ideas and solutions.
Okay, so we've talked about the crisis of liberalism, the rise of AI, and even the potential for dataism to become this dominant force. But what about the role of religion in all of this? Harari takes a pretty unique approach to religion, doesn't he?
He does. He's not a devout believer, and he's not a staunch atheist either. He's more of a detached observer looking at religion as this cultural phenomenon, this set of beliefs and practices that have played a profound role in shaping human societies throughout history.
So he's not trying to convert anyone or debunk any specific religion. He's more interested in understanding how religion works, what its strengths and weaknesses are.
Exactly. He acknowledges the positive aspects of religion, its ability to bring people together, provide moral guidance, and inspire compassion and altruism. But he also doesn't shy away from the darker side of religion, the way it can be used to justify violence, oppression, and discrimination.
Right, and he's particularly critical of those Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, arguing that their emphasis on one all-powerful God has contributed to this sense of human exceptionalism, this idea that we're separate from and superior to the rest of nature.
That's right. He suggests that this worldview has led to this disregard for the environment and a tendency to exploit the planet's resources without thinking about the long-term consequences.
He makes a pretty strong case that we need to rediscover a more animistic perspective, a way of seeing ourselves as part of a larger web of life interconnected with all living things. It's a pretty radical shift from the dominant worldview that shaped our culture for centuries.
It is, and it ties into his exploration of the relationship between religion and nationalism. He argues that nationalism is essentially a secularized form of religion, replacing God with the nation as the object of worship.
So those national anthems, flags, and monuments, they serve the same purpose as religious hymns, icons, and temples, inspiring feelings of awe, reverence, and loyalty.
Precisely. And he suggests that nationalist narratives, much like religious myths, often rely on a very selective interpretation of history, glorifying the nation's past achievements while downplaying or completely ignoring its less flattering moments.
It's like we're creating these idealized versions of our nations, just like we create idealized versions of ourselves with that inner storyteller we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And this can be really dangerous because it can lead to this us versus them mentality that justifies all sorts of violence and discrimination against anyone perceived as an outsider or an enemy.
It's a powerful argument, and it makes you think about how easily our tribal instincts can be manipulated, whether it's through religion, nationalism, or even something like fandom.
Harari doesn't shy away from challenging conventional wisdom, even when it comes to religion. One of his more controversial arguments is about the historical impact of Judaism. He argues that despite its significance, it's had a relatively limited impact on the grand sweep of human history.
Okay, that's a bold statement. I'm sure that stirred up some debate.
Yeah.
How does he justify that view?
He starts by acknowledging that Judaism has absolutely made significant contributions to Western civilization, especially in the realm of ethics and morality.
I mean, the Ten Commandments, the idea of one God, the focus on social justice. I mean, those are all pretty big deals, right? They've influenced Western thought and culture in major ways.
Absolutely, but Harari's point is that for much of its history, Judaism was a relatively small and isolated religion, mostly confined to a specific geographic region and ethnic group. He suggests it was only with the rise of Christianity, which incorporated many of Judaism's core beliefs and spread them throughout the Roman Empire and beyond that, that those ideas started to have a truly global impact.
So he's saying that Christianity acted as this amplifier for Jewish ideas,
Yeah.
spreading them to a much wider audience.
Exactly. And he also points out that Jewish religious law, the
Yeah.
Halakha, is this incredibly complex and often rigid system of rules and regulations. And this has made it difficult for Judaism to adapt to changing circumstances and attract new converts.
That's interesting. So he's comparing it to Christianity, which has been much more flexible and adaptable, allowing it to spread rapidly through missionary work and appeal to a broader range of people.
Exactly, but it's important to note that Harari isn't trying to dismiss the importance of Judaism or its beliefs. He's simply analyzing its historical impact from a wider perspective, comparing it to other major religions and ideologies that have shaped the course of human civilization.
It's a good reminder that even our understanding of history can be influenced by our own biases and assumptions. We need to be willing to challenge those preconceived notions and approach history with an open mind.
Absolutely. And speaking of challenging conventional wisdom, Harari delves into this fascinating analysis of anger, this universal human emotion that can be both powerful and destructive. He explores how religious beliefs can both fuel and mitigate anger.
Anger is something we all experience, but it can be a pretty destructive force if we don't learn to manage it effectively. What's Harari's take on it?
He starts by acknowledging that anger is a natural human response. It's how we react to threats and perceived injustices. It's a primal emotion wired into us to help protect ourselves from harm and to fight for what we believe in.
But as we all know, uncontrolled anger can lead to some pretty bad outcomes, not just for others, but for ourselves as well.
Exactly. It can lead to impulsive behavior, rash decisions, and even acts of violence that we end up regretting later. And this is where religion comes into play. Harari argues that religious beliefs can have a complex and sometimes contradictory role in shaping our relationship with anger.
So how can religion both fuel and mitigate anger?
Well, on the one hand, many religions teach the importance of forgiveness, compassion, and turning the other cheek. These teachings can help us manage our anger, see the humanity in those who've wronged us, and break free from those cycles of revenge and violence.
But on the other hand, religious beliefs can also be used to justify anger and aggression, especially when people feel like their beliefs are being threatened or violated.
Exactly. Think about all those religious wars, sectarian violence, and persecutions throughout history. All too often, religion has been used to legitimize hatred and violence.
So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Religion can offer tools for managing anger and promoting peace, but it can also be twisted to fuel anger and justify violence.
It really highlights the importance of being mindful of how our beliefs, both religious and secular, can influence our emotions and actions.
We need to be aware of how those beliefs can be manipulated, and we need to cultivate those teachings that promote peace, compassion, and understanding.
You know, one of Harari's most insightful and I'd say counterintuitive arguments is that the key to navigating this increasingly complex and uncertain world, it might lie in embracing our own ignorance.
That goes against everything we're taught, doesn't it? We're supposed to seek out knowledge to have all the answers.
Right. It's natural to crave certainty. We want clear-cut answers to life's big questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? But Harari argues that in a world that's changing so rapidly, clinging to absolute certainty can be dangerous.
So the more we cling to rigid beliefs and outdated dogmas, the less likely we are to adapt to new information and find creative solutions to the challenges we're facing.
Exactly. He encourages us to be skeptical of any claims of absolute truth, whether they come from religious authorities, political leaders, or even scientific experts.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Especially in today's world where it feels like everyone has an opinion and everyone's shouting their truths from the rooftops.
It is, but remember, even the most brilliant minds can be wrong, and our understanding of the world is constantly evolving.
So what's the alternative? If we can't rely on experts and authorities to give us all the answers, where do we turn?
Harari suggests that the most important questions in life are often the ones that don't have easy answers. And sometimes the process of searching for those answers is more valuable than the answers themselves.
That's a really powerful idea. It's like he's encouraging us to embrace the mystery, the unknown, and to be okay with not having all the answers.
Exactly. And this ties into another one of his radical suggestions that we should turn to the ancient wisdom of Buddhism to find our way forward in this uncertain future.
Okay, now before you dismiss this as some kind of new age mumbo jumbo, hear me out. Harari isn't talking about converting to Buddhism or chanting mantras all day. He's specifically talking about the practice of mindfulness.
Right. And it's not just some trendy self-help fad mindfulness in the Buddhist tradition. It's about cultivating this deep awareness of your thoughts, feelings, and sensations without judgment. It's about learning to observe your own mind without getting swept away by the constant stream of thoughts and emotions.
So how can this ancient practice help us deal with the challenges of the 21st century? It seems like we're facing problems that the Buddha could never have imagined.
Harari argues that by developing this deeper self-awareness, we can gain a clearer perspective on the forces that are shaping our behavior.
Yeah.
We can become less reactive, less impulsive, and less likely to get caught up in those negative thought patterns that can lead to anxiety, stress, and suffering.
So it's about becoming more aware of our own minds, but also becoming more aware of the ways that our minds are being shaped by external forces, like the media, social media, and even the algorithms that are constantly feeding us information.
You got it. And this awareness can help us make more conscious choices, resist manipulation, and cultivate a sense of inner peace and well-being, even when the world around us feels chaotic and overwhelming.
It's not about rejecting technology or escaping from the world. It's about developing those inner resources that allow us to engage with the world in a more skillful and compassionate way.
And it's about recognizing that the greatest danger we face might not be some external threat, but our own flawed thinking, our own unexamined biases, and our own tendency to get caught up in those stories that our minds are constantly spinning.
So mindfulness is about waking up to reality, to the way things actually are, and seeing through those illusions that keep us trapped in cycles of suffering.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of Harari's most thought-provoking arguments, that the very nature of truth itself might be changing in the 21st century.
Okay, that sounds like we're entering some pretty deep philosophical territory here.
Yeah.
What does he mean by that? Is truth no longer what it used to be?
Well, he points out that for most of human history, truth was seen as something objective, something that existed outside of our own beliefs and perceptions.
You mean like the laws of physics, the principles of mathematics, those kinds of things. Those were seen as universally true, regardless of what any individual believed.
Right, but Harari argues that in the age of the internet, social media and artificial intelligence, truth is becoming more fluid, more subjective. We're living in this world of information overload where we're constantly bombarded with competing narratives, fake news, and alternative facts.
It's like everyone has their own version of the truth now, and it's becoming harder and harder to sort out what's real and what's not.
Exactly. And Harari suggests that this erosion of objective truth, it's one of the most significant challenges we face in the 21st century.
So how did this affect our lives? What are the implications of this shifting understanding of truth?
Well, for starters, it undermines trust. It becomes harder to trust experts, institutions, and even each other. And this can lead to all sorts of problems, from political polarization to the spread of conspiracy theories.
And it also makes it easier for those in power to manipulate public opinion, right? If truth is relative, then anyone can claim to be telling the truth even when they're blatantly lying.
You're absolutely right. And that's why Harari stresses the importance of critical thinking. We need to develop the skills to evaluate information, to identify biases, and to distinguish between credible sources and those that are spreading misinformation.
So it's not just about being skeptical of everything we hear. It's about becoming more and more discerning, more thoughtful about the information we consume.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that our own beliefs and biases can influence how we interpret information. We need to be aware of our own filters, our own tendencies to see the world through a particular lens.
So it's not just about fact checking. It's about self-awareness, about understanding how...
You've got it. And this brings us back to one of Harari's most important messages, that the future is not predetermined. It's not something that just happens to us. It's something we create through our choices and actions.
So we're not just passengers on this runaway train. We're the engineers, the conductors, the ones who decide where the train goes and how fast to travel.
Exactly. And that's both empowering and terrifying, isn't it? We have the power to shape the future, but we also have the responsibility to make wise choices.
So what does Harari suggest we do? How can we make those wise choices in a world that feels increasingly complex and uncertain?
He urges us to engage with the big questions, to cultivate wisdom and compassion, and to take responsibility for the world we're creating. He reminds us that we're living in an extraordinary time, a time of unprecedented possibilities and potential dangers.
And he suggests that the most important question we can ask ourselves is not what will happen, but rather what kind of world do we want to create?
It's a question that demands our attention, our imagination, and our unwavering commitment to making the world a better place.
Okay, so we need to engage with the big questions and make conscious choices about the future. But what about those blurred lines between humans and animals that we were talking about earlier? Where does that fit into the picture?
That's a really crucial point. Harari argues that this traditional distinction between humans and animals might be breaking down in the 21st century. He suggests that as machines become more intelligent and animals are revealed to be more complex than we ever realized, those old categories of human and animal, they might not be enough anymore.
It's a really fascinating and challenging idea. It forces us to rethink our place in the world and how we relate to other forms of life.
Exactly. And it raises all sorts of ethical questions about how we treat animals, how we develop artificial intelligence, and even what it means to be human in a world where those lines are becoming increasingly blurred.
So we have to be prepared to let go of some of those old assumptions and embrace a more expansive view of life on Earth.
And this brings us to another one of Harari's key insights. The history is not this straight line of progress toward some utopian endpoint. We often like to think of it that way, right? From primitive societies to advanced civilizations, from ignorance to enlightenment, from darkness to light. But Harari says it's not that simple.
Right, because for every step forward, it seems like we take a step back. For every technological breakthrough, there's a potential for unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And for every victory for freedom and justice, there's the risk of sliding back into tyranny and oppression. It's like we're constantly moving forward and backward at the same time.
Exactly. And that's why Harari urges us to approach history with this sense of humility. We need to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers, that we're constantly learning and evolving, and that the best we can do is to try to make wise choices based on the information we have.
So it's not about predicting the future with certainty. It's about being mindful of the past, being aware of the present, and making conscious choices that align with our values and aspirations for the future.
You got it. And speaking of challenging assumptions, Harari dives into this incredibly complex and controversial topic. The concept of free will It's a debate that's been raging for centuries, but new scientific discoveries are adding fuel to the fire.
So how does Harari tackle this age-old question? Does he think we have free will, or are we just puppets on a string controlled by forces beyond our conscious awareness?
He starts by acknowledging that for most of human history, the idea of free will was taken for granted. We believed we were autonomous beings making choices freely and independently. But Harari argues that this belief is being challenged by modern science.
So what's science telling us about free will? Is it an illusion?
Well, discoveries in fields like neuroscience, genetics, and psychology are showing us that our choices are shaped by this whole web of factors, our genes, our upbringing, our environment, even those subconscious processes happening in our brains that we're not even aware of.
It's a pretty mind-blowing concept, isn't it? To think that our choices, our actions, even our thoughts and feelings, they might be the result of this complex chain of causes and effects that are ultimately beyond our conscious control.
It is, and Harari acknowledges that this idea can be unsettling, even disturbing to some people.
Yeah.
It challenges our most basic assumptions about who we are and how we operate in the world.
So if free will is an illusion, does that mean we're off the hook?
Mm-hmm.
We're not responsible for our actions?
That's not what Harari is suggesting. He actually argues that letting go of this illusion of free will can be incredibly liberating. If we can accept that our choices are shaped by factors beyond our conscious control, we can stop blaming ourselves for our shortcomings, stop judging others for their mistakes, and start focusing on creating a more compassionate and understanding world.
It's a radical shift in perspective, isn't it? Instead of trying to control everything we learn, to accept that the uncertainty and complexity of life, recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our actions have ripple effects far, far beyond what we can imagine.
It's a profound idea, and it connects to one of Harari's most challenging arguments, that the nation state, this political structure that's been so dominant for centuries, it might be becoming obsolete.
So he's saying that the nation states, while they've been essential for centuries, might be hitting their expiration date. They might not be the best way to address the challenges of the 21st century.
Exactly. Think about it. Climate change doesn't care about borders. A pandemic can spread across the globe in a matter of days. And the development of AI, it's not limited to any one country.
It's like those global issues are demanding a more global response. Our current systems are starting to look a bit like those old rotary phones trying to keep up with the latest smartphone technology.
That's a great analogy. And Harari argues that if we want to effectively tackle these global issues, we need to start thinking beyond national borders. We need a new kind of identity, a sense of loyalty that extends beyond our own tribe, our own nation.
So he's not necessarily advocating for a world government, but more of a shift in our political thinking where global problems and interests take precedence over purely national concerns. It's a pretty radical idea.
It is, but it's also incredibly important. We're facing challenges that simply can't be solved by individual countries acting alone. Climate change, nuclear proliferation, artificial intelligence. These are issues that demand global cooperation and a sense of shared responsibility.
So we need a new story, a new narrative that can unite humanity in the face of these existential threats. A story that can help us transcend those old tribal divisions and recognize our common humanity.
Exactly, and that's a huge challenge, but it's also an incredible opportunity. We have the chance to create a new chapter in the human story, one that's defined by cooperation, compassion, and a deep understanding of our interconnectedness.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Harari's work, I think we're left with this sense of both possibility and responsibility. We're standing at a crossroads with choices to make that will shape not only our own lives but the future of humanity.
Harari doesn't offer easy answers. He doesn't give us a roadmap to the future, but But he does give us something incredibly valuable. He gives us a framework for thinking about the big questions. He challenges our assumptions, encourages us to be skeptical, and reminds us that we have the power to shape our own destiny.
He's like that wise friend who asks those probing questions
Yeah.
that make you uncomfortable, but ultimately help you see the world in a new light.
Exactly. And that's what makes his work so compelling. It's not about telling us what to think, but about helping us to think more deeply, more critically, and more creatively about the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
So as we step out of this deep dive and back into our everyday lives, I hope we can all carry with us a little bit of that Harari-inspired skepticism, curiosity, and that sense of urgency to create a future worthy of our shared humanity.
Well said. It's been a fascinating journey exploring these ideas, and who knows, maybe someday we'll look back on this conversation as a pivotal moment, a time when we started to ask the right questions and to imagine a future where humanity embraced its full potential.
Until next time, keep those minds buzzing, keep those hearts open, and keep diving deep.